Hey, hello, good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. We hope everyone is well and staying safe. Today is Tuesday, June the 16th. This is COVID-19. Don't have your estate go down the drain. My name is Ashley, Client Services Coordinator, and I have the privilege of introducing our presenters, Deanna Ebley and Vincent Russo. Deanna is a partner with Russo Law Group and has nearly 20 years of experience. She's the lead planner in all three of our office locations, including Garden City, Islandia, and Manhattan. She's also an active member of several bar associations and currently appointed to the Executive Committee of the New York State Bar Association. Helping to facilitate today's webinar is Vincent Russo. Vincent is the managing partner of Russo Law Group. He's also co-founder of the Teresa Alessandra Russo Foundation for Children with Special Needs and a founding member, fellow, and fifth president of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys. I would like to mention that we are available to answer your questions, so please send them to us by way of the questions box provided in the Zoom platform. If you're joining us through Facebook, feel free to drop your questions in the comments section. Finally, those joining us through Zoom, a short survey will appear in your web browser once we end the webinar. If you could take a second to fill that out, let us know how we did. We would sure appreciate it. Okay, Vincent, if you would, please take us through today's agenda.
Okay, thank you, Ashley, as always. And it's great to be with you all again, and especially to have my partner, Deanna Ebley, with me. She's going to answer all the tough questions that I'm going to ask her. So, Always. And so the reason for this particular workshop is this question that I've always asked our clients when we meet with them. And we do estate planning, and we're gonna talk about how they're going to leave their assets to loved ones, typically children, could be grandchildren, and other family members. And they're going to do that through a will, a last will and testament, or a living trust, a living revocable trust. And so that's the starting point. But then I think there's a really important question that follows, which is, when you leave those assets to your family members, are you leaving those assets in a protective way? Or are you just trusting that those assets can pass to the family and that they'll do the right thing, that no bad things will happen to them, or their circumstances are such that they're always going to be in a position to manage and protect what you work so hard to create and leave for them, your legacy. So today we're going to cover how we are going to ensure that you do not have your estate go down the drain. We're going to start with how to leave your assets in a protective way for your family. The importance of asset protection for children and grandchildren, even good children and grandchildren. Unfortunately, bad things can happen to good people. How to safeguard your assets for family members who have creditor or marital problems. And then what is the solution? And the solution we've created at Russo Law Group is the Family Protection Trust. And this is a most powerful vehicle that many should have as an essential part of their estate plan. So with that as the backdrop, we're going to move into the program itself. I'm going to just take a moment and hide myself from the screen. And we're going to start with, what is a family protection trust, Deanna?
So it is a special type of living trust. Sometimes you hear it as a safe trust, and it protects assets for loved ones. You know, it could be assets and income from bad people, bad situations. And we've seen everything from protecting it because we're worried about who the child is marrying, to, you know, there's a bad circumstance with drug or alcohol abuse, or even somebody who's disabled. And it allows access to income and assets for the beneficiary, and the beneficiary can be a family member, a partner, a loved one, essentially anybody that you want it to be.
Okay, so it's a special type of trust. It's going to have different types of provisions than, let's say, a revocable living trust, which is done simply to avoid probate.
Correct.
This is a trust that's for not you, the person setting it up, but it's going to be a trust for your loved one because you want to leave the assets in a protective way. So, Deanna, give us a little more on who needs a family protection trust.
So one of the circumstances that we've dealt with, unfortunately, a little bit more often recently than I would love to see is we've had a lot of clients come in with children who are having issues with some kind of substance abuse. And the concern is always that you don't want that substance abuse to be driven by the fact that someone has access to money. And so a lot of parents are setting up these trusts so that they can mandate that a trustee maybe pays the landlord directly for that person's rent, and the money doesn't go in the hands of the child directly and get used for whatever they're using at the moment. And it's just a way for parents to have that comfort of, or grandparents to have that comfort of knowing that there's always a roof over their child's head and there's a way of taking care of them, but not contributing to the problem at the moment.
And Deanna, when we say children, we're talking about children
All ages.
20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and some of the children of our clients are in their 60s.
Yeah, all ages. I mean, it's hitting everybody, especially with COVID, it's hitting everybody very different.
Now, beyond drugs as a concern, other concerns there?
So there's concerns about a bad marriage. We've had issues where clients come in and a child may be filing for bankruptcy, and the parents want to make sure that any inheritance that the child may be getting isn't going to be part of the bankruptcy or dealt with on a creditor level. You have often referred to this as the parental prenup, which works very well. Whether or not you like the future in-law, there's the divorce rate, unfortunately, is easily 50%. And I'm sure after COVID and everybody being quarantined together, it's probably going to go up. And so you want to make sure that the family money stays in the family, and that's one of the biggest concerns that families have when they set up this trust, to make sure that the family money stays within the family.
You've really hit on some key situations where a family protection trust fits in to the overall estate plan. In our office, we've created a checklist of 22 factors that we look at to determine whether a family protection trust would make sense for you and your family. Other situations that we've seen, unfortunately, alcohol addiction, or someone who has a gambling problem. And so we don't want to see you leaving assets that you want that loved one to use and live off of the rest of their life be wasted and spent foolishly. Also, if a family member is a spendthrift, so if they have money, they'll spend it and it'll be gone. And that's not what you really would want. That's not how you want to leave your legacy. Can you give us a couple examples of creditor type problems, Deanna?
Creditor type problems can be anything from, like I mentioned, bankruptcy to even somebody who is a good person and they get into an accident, or something happens where they're being sued, and you want to make sure that the assets are protected so that it's not subject to anything in that respect. It runs the gamut. It's credit cards, it's outstanding medical bills, house getting foreclosed on, right up to being sued for something.
So there are a lot of families who have children or grandchildren who are really pushed to the end of making financial ends meet. And so they're struggling, and especially in light of the COVID-19 and so many people out of work. So concerns about running into debt. And if you were to leave your assets, you don't want to leave them to the creditors. You want to make sure they're left for your child. And so the Family Protection Trust can be helpful there. Also, someone with tax problems. Perhaps they haven't been filing their tax returns, or there's a tax claim against them. So here again, you don't want to leave the assets directly for then the IRS of New York State to take those assets away. You want to leave them in a protective way. So a number of different situations. And then there are a number of our clients who have a loved one that's physically or mentally disabled. So why would a Family Protection Trust be helpful there, Deanna?
So in circumstances where somebody is physically or mentally disabled, there's a concern that they're getting some kind of government benefit. And if they qualify for a government benefit, you don't want them to inherit money outright, which will affect their ability to maintain that government benefit. So by putting the assets into a trust, that gives the opportunity for the family member to not only still maintain the government benefits, but supplement the benefits with the money that they're inheriting from you. So they can essentially supplement the care they're getting or pay for things that might not be covered, and they won't lose the benefits in lieu of that.
Let's switch gears a little bit and talk to me about an example of when a client has a specific objective in mind in terms of how they want to leave the assets.
So the most obvious would be education. A parent or grandparent decides that they want to make sure that they cover, let's use a grandparent, they cover their grandchild's education. We all know that it can be very costly. You know, we're looking at $100,000 easy for a 4-year education, and putting the money into a trust specifically for the use on that education is important, because then the grandparents know, in my example, that that's where the money is being spent, and that's going to help the grandchild come out of school without debt, and you know, make it a lot easier for them to transition into the working world.
Yeah, and we've seen situations where families who have more higher levels of worth are concerned that if, God forbid, something happened to them, and if they left a significant amount to a family member, perhaps that child now inherits $1 million and thinks, well, I don't need to go to college.
Right.
Or someone inherits money and they're in their 20s or 30s, and then they decide, well, I don't need to work anymore. And so when you create a legacy, you're also transitioning the values that you have onto your family. And how does that work in conjunction with how you leave your assets? You want to tie that in. So the Family Protection Trust allows you to really embrace the values that you have for your family in a way that then financially it can follow through and hopefully allow that family member to have the best of both worlds, financial security and also the values you're passing on. So we've spent a little bit of time here on what the benefits are, and I think they're so important. I'm going to ask Deanna to kind of run through the list of benefits again of the Family Protection Trust.
So those benefits are that they ensure that assets pass to the people who you want to benefit from your estate. They are a marital protection. They have creditor protection. They maximize government benefits like Medicaid and SSI, supplemental security income. And they can also minimize taxes. So Vincent, you know that a lot of our clients who have higher end estates who are concerned about estate taxes often use these types of trusts as a tool to help minimize how much estate taxes their estate will ultimately pay when they pass.
Right, kind of supercharging that trust document, not only for asset protection, but also minimizing taxes. Deanna, can you spend a minute or two on, or whatever amount you need, on how does the Family Protection Trust work? You know, on a real practical level, this could be like, well, it's a nice concept or a strategy, but, you know, I'm not sure I really understand how it's going to work.
So it's always set up by you. You provide for expenditures of income and assets based on your desires. So if you feel that the person that you're setting this trust up for is entitled to specific amounts, like in my example of somebody who may be a substance abuser and you didn't want them to get more than a specific amount every month, you can set that standard, or you could say they're just entitled to the income that the trust generates in a given month or a year. And you also name a trustee who has discretion to change that amount or spend a little bit more than that amount if they see that it needs to be done. The trust itself can be either revocable or irrevocable. So revocable is generally, it can be changed and it has some flexibility. Irrevocable, in very general terms, it's you set the guidelines, it's set and not really changed unless they do major things with some nuances under the law.
Yeah, typically the irrevocable would be
Tax purposes.
if you were looking to fund it while you're alive. So sometimes the way we do this is we create this family protection trust and you put $10 in and it's revocable or irrevocable, but there's only $10 in it. And your will says, take what I have and place, if I have 3 children, I'm leaving it 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, take 1/3 of what I have and put it into that family protection trust when I pass. So typically, it's really a trust set up with only $10 in it while you're alive. If it's funded while you're alive with actual assets, that's generally done because someone wants to save estate taxes.
Right.
We built in that estate tax planning that
Right.
Anna mentioned a minute ago.
And
how does it work when it comes to reporting the income for tax purposes?
so the income is reported on your personal income tax return so that you're paying the taxes as you normally would on the assets, as opposed to paying at a higher income tax rate for a trust.
And that's really a non-issue if it's $10 and you're just funding it to create it with that $10 initially.
Right. You could also be the trustee of the trust, or if you're more comfortable, you can name somebody else. And your trustee would manage the assets in there. Now, in your example, if there's only $10 in there, it's not such a big deal. But for somebody who's funding it with significantly more upfront, they want to make sure that somebody is in there managing the assets and making sure that things sustain themselves and they're not being invested wildly. So if it's irrevocable, you could also set the trust up to save estate taxes, which is often one of the biggest reasons why clients do irrevocable trusts.
Right. So just to summarize, it's a trust you set up, and I would say that most clients who set it up, they just put $10 in it. They typically make it revocable so they can change it anytime they want while they're alive. They name a successor trustee. It can be co-trustees, so the beneficiary could also be a co-trustee with another person. We don't want to limit the ability of the beneficiary to have access to the assets. So it's written in a way that we want to make it available, but protected from all the terrible things that could happen that we hope never happen to people. But then there's a real world out there.
Correct.
So let me just kind of summarize, I think, what we've said here today, which is a family protection trust can be a terrific planning strategy / vehicle for as part of your estate plan if you want to leave your assets in the most protective way for your family. And I'm a big believer in this. Why leave assets in a way that they're at risk when you want your children and grandchildren to benefit from them, not some third party like a bad spouse or a creditor? We know there are situations, and life isn't perfect, where we have concerns about what would happen to those assets when we leave them outright. And so we talked about who needs this type of trust. We then spoke about the benefits, the significant benefits of asset protection from creditors, bad marriages, and if someone is on a government benefit like Medicaid or SSI, how those assets can be left in a protective way and also in a way that they can be properly managed. And then we just went over how it's set up. And the key then is for you to consider, is this important to me? Is it whatever I have, no matter what the total value is it important enough to me that I wouldn't want to leave these assets in the most protective way? And if so, am I willing to spend some money and time to set up the plan? So for those who feel like this was really helpful, then I suggest you have to create the plan, not just think about it for the next 10 years, but actually go ahead and do it. Like I said, it's a trust typically with $10 in it, so you can always change your mind later on if you decide to do that. You're going to need the services of a professional. Our law firm has really focused in on this issue. We have drafted and established thousands of these family protection trusts through the years. The key then is to take action and get that plan implemented. And when you do that, then you've got a plan of success and peace of mind in how you can leave your assets. So with that, we're going to open it up to Q&A and see. I'm going to check with Ashley. And Ashley and Deanna will join us by video as well. Any questions, Ashley, from anyone?
Not that I see, not on Zoom or Facebook yet.
Okay, so we'll give it a moment. And so let's go back to we'll talk for a moment to see if any questions do come up. So Deanna, when families are coming in, I think that most of them are thinking about just who's going to get my assets versus how I'm going to leave them, right?
Yes, absolutely. They want to make sure that they worked so hard for everything and that their family is going to enjoy it. And like you said, it's a legacy.
Right. Another interesting aspect, because there was a recent change in the Inherited IRA rules. And so here again, a number of our clients have created a significant amount of wealth inside their IRAs and 401k plans. And so then the question is, do I leave that IRA directly to my children, or do I do something different? And what we found out with the Supreme Court, US Supreme Court, a few years ago, is that they determined there's no creditor protection for the beneficiary of an inherited IRA. And so now we see here again the importance of thinking about creating a family protection trust and having the IRA or 401k channeled into the family protection trust so that it's always kept protected. And so that's a real eye-opener for a number of our clients when we bring it up.
So Vincent, there is a question from Corinne about whether or not you could please clarify whether a family protection trust can live within an existing revocable trust.
Okay, and Corinne's one of our long-standing clients. So hello, Corinne, and I really appreciate you checking in on our Facebook Live workshops. And so the answer is yes, you could build it into the actual living trust document or your will document. We tend to separate them out because of the amount of detail that we want to put into that trust so that we don't overwhelm someone with a will that is very long and complicated or a living trust that's long and complicated. Also, when you separate it out, it makes it easier for families to focus in on that particular trust provisions for a beneficiary. So if I have 3 children, we might not have identical trusts for each one. We may tweak one trust because of a child's particular situation versus another. And so having them separated and outside of the main document also creates a little more privacy and a customization that you would want to have. Because once we start customizing different sub-trusts inside one trust, it can get very complicated and confusing.
I agree. And so we also have, I think I lost it. Toby sent a message saying, excuse me, when setting up a trust, do you recommend that the information be shared with family members so they're aware of their parents' wishes? Because might this prevent arguments or conflict later?
Okay, and somehow you've turned it so I'm the one answering the questions. I don't know how that happened, but
because school is out and I'm concerned you can hear the children in the background.
Right, I'm gonna let you get away with it. So, Toby, this is where I think we can add value, because when you meet with an estate planner, it's not necessarily the documents that you're paying for the knowledge and experience of the attorney. And so what we would want to do is sit with you and understand your particular situation and your concerns, and then create the type of family protection trust that makes sense. Did I answer the question? I'm not, Deanna?
I mean, would you also, yeah, I mean, you did, but I think they're really asking whether or not you would also share those wishes with the
Okay,
with the kids.
So the second part, yeah.
Yeah.
So the second part is, I knew I didn't fully answer it. So the second part is that every family situation needs to be considered, because they're not all the same. I'm a big fan that if you have a family, that it would be a positive situation to have a family discussion and have family members involved in your estate plan and understand what you're doing and how you're doing it. I think that's the best way to go. I'm not sure we can do that in every family situation. Some families maybe maybe have dysfunctions, or there's an outlier child that you really wouldn't want to bring into that discussion. So that's why I opened up with everybody's situation is different. We'd want to really understand your particular family situation. But here again, I'm a big fan of communication. And I'm a believer that with our experience, we can have that kind of conversation with the family if the client wants us to be the ones presenting what you're doing and how you're doing it. It's worked out very well. Any others, Deanna, or are we?
I don't see any others, but Toby did say thank you, that in her circumstances, they're a blended family and there are kids and stepchildren, and they wanted to be transparent with not creating any conflict. So,
yeah, I'm a big fan of transparency. All right, so I think that really brings us to a conclusion today. I'll just end with what I think makes our law firm different. We are open now. We're in stage 2 here in New York. We have 5 convenient office locations on Long Island and New York City. We've networked, co-counsel with attorneys throughout the country. If you have a family issue outside of New York, we're also licensed in Florida. I know that's a big deal for the snowbirds who do travel down there. We can help you with Florida as well as New York estate planning. We're very strong in crisis situations. I think we see a lot of that coming to us because of our experience. We've made ourselves available to our clients in a couple unique ways, including having a client maintenance program that Deanna heads up and oversees in our office. And we give family discounts to other family members, such as children who come in and do their estate plan. We're very involved in the community. We're supporting the frontline workers. Deanna's heading up a department in our office for any frontline workers who would like us to do their estate plan at no charge at all. We're talking about those who are in the hospitals and nursing homes, for example. you can call us and ask for Deanna.
I would
And
love to talk to you.
yes, she is totally engaged. And then with the virus, we've been really on top of trying to share information about emergency orders by Governor Cuomo and changes that have occurred and benefits that are available. And we have a crisis page on our website. And you can always call us at 516-683-1717. So I want to thank Deanna for her presentation today, and thank you all for attending our workshop on Family Protection Trust. Have a
Thank you
great
very
day
much.
and be safe.